Boita. I'm head of marketing for light spirits at Pernod Ricard, and today I'm going to be talking about Absolut Silverpoint, which is a collaboration we did with Punch Drunk and an agency called Something Else. I'm going to be talking about how we approached it, what the brief was, some learnings for people when you're going into kind of multiple collaborations with multiple partners, and I guess a real sneak peek behind what made Silverpoint and hopefully what made it such an exciting and innovative.
Hi everyone. Amazing presentation, thank you Steve. I actually met the guys at Dojo only yesterday, and again similar story, 25 years old, 3 of them already on their third series of funding, 6 million investment, and they've got one of the most amazing social apps for what you want to do in and around about London for millennials and Generation Y, what it's called. But I'm here to talk about Silverpoint. Another amazing story from a personal point of view. It's a real personal passion project, really. Took over my life for probably about a year. I mean, hands up, has anyone heard of Silverpoint? Did anyone actually play it? A couple of you in the audience, okay. So, yeah, let me kick off. If you're over 35, you probably remember Absolut in the good old days, especially the bottle advertising, Absolut X, Absolut Y. But if you're under 35, you know, it's about making Absolut relevant to the new consumer again that doesn't necessarily get the old advertising of Absolut. And here's that buzzword. For us, it's about recruiting brand advocates through disruption and disrupting the category. And when you talk about storytelling and branded content or whatever you want to talk about it, the audience is really thinking this, or they're not thinking that. And what we recognize also is that the experience economy is taking over consumers' lives. I'm a massive Back to the Future fan, dressed up as Marty McFly many times, got hoverboard. But the Secret Cinema series and what they did with the experience economy with Back to the Future and bringing the whole of Hill Valley to life, those experiences and those, social experiences are what drives, currency amongst our audience these days. So for us, we had a twofold objective, really, with this campaign. We knew that our audience were really interested in immersive theatre and immersive experiences. And on the other hand, we also had to launch the limited edition bottle. So Absolut, if you don't know, we have a history of collaboration with artists. Andy Warhol was the first artist that we collaborated back in the day in 1985. And it was the anniversary of that Warhol collaboration, and hence why we were launching an Andy Warhol bottle. So we're putting those two things together. And I was a massive fan, personally, of Punch Drunk. I'd already been to Drowned Man, and I'd been to their experience in New York, Sleep No More. And so I approached Punch Drunk directly. I guess that's one of the things that really hopefully sets us apart as Absolut. We always approach our artists pretty much directly. We don't tend to go through agencies. We like to own that relationship and work directly with creatives. Has its ups and downs, obviously, working directly with a creative powerhouse. But you really get to the source and you get some great creative ideas that come out of it. So we chatted with Felix, who's the creative director and founder of Punch Drunk, and he came to us with an idea of exploring incremental gaming and blending the digital and physical worlds with obviously a compelling story at the heart, which is obviously what they do. And my background, I also used to work for PlayStation before I joined Pernod Ricard and Absolut, and so that for me kind of ticked both boxes and really piqued my interest. But you've got to find a credible link when you work with a brand. You know, when you're working with a creative director, Punch Drunk Theatre Productions is a charity, and so they're very picky as to who they work with, and especially when they work with brands and what brands want to get out of collaboration. And for us, it's always about collaboration. It's never about a badging exercise. So you've got Andy Warhol, incredible rich history. You can choose anything from Marilyn to the Elvises and all those kind of famous pieces that everyone knows. But in order to provide a point of differentiation, they went back into the Warhol archives. We had a direct link to the Warhol Foundation in New York and Pittsburgh. And they've stumbled upon these, sketches from Warhol called the Silverpoint drawings. Now, for those of you who don't know what Silverpoint is, it's when you dip a pen in ink, literally with a silver point, and you sketch. And that provided the link for us because when Warhol sketched the original Absolut ad, he did it in a Silverpoint way. And that then provided a credible link to the limited edition bottle that we were producing and obviously the original collaboration. But we also needed a technology enabler to bring, I guess, that incremental game to life, and that was with something else. They've released many games like Papa Sangre. They personally knew Felix, so they, again, very, very tight team in terms of how each of the parties knew how each other how they like to work, which made things a lot easier. One of the hardest things, I think, is making sure that your brand is, I guess, integrated in any project that you do, and also that it's really credible. And, you know, the Punch Drunk audience are super savvy when it comes to kind of brand collaboration, so we needed to kind of get it right. But you've also got to make sure that your brand's out there and people realize that you're actually doing a collaboration and making sure that the brand shines through. So we were very obvious up front when people downloaded the game, that it was to celebrate the Andy Warhol limited edition, and it was inspired by 8 of Andy Warhol's Silverpoint sketches, and that was it really. That's the only introduction we really gave to the brand, and the rest of it unfolded as part of the narrative. So at its heart, and I'll show you how the game worked in a moment, it was a very, very simple game. It was match 3 symbols, align the planets, and the whole theme was really around finding a girl called Chloe who had disappeared in Warhol's time. One of the Silverpoint sketches was of a woman called Chloe, hence the link. And your idea was, the aim of the game was to find out what had happened to Chloe, and the last clue that had been given to you was the fact that she'd be playing this game that's in your hand. And by playing this game, you would find out what happened to Chloe. So I'll just play a quick video to give you a little insight.
I'm sorry, this might sound a bit funny, but something about you is ringing bells, but it's not the voice, it's something else. It's almost in the way you're holding yourself, or the way your eyes move around. It's something, I mean, it's even right there in your breathing. It's the way you're holding your phone. So right there in the palm of your hand. We've met before, haven't we? Perfect, I've got everything I need. You go back and enjoy your evening. Goodbye. So, is someone there? Can you hear me? I'm in this room. I'm in a small concrete room. Past the bookshop.
Please, if you can hear this, I think I can remember the road.
Past the
And I
bookshop.
need you to come and find me
Please,
right
if you
now.
can hear me, really come and find me. Yes, you're making brilliant progress. We're friends now, aren't we? Come quick, I'm at the bottom of the stairs. You're close now. You're really, really close.
Birds singing in the sycamore tree. Dream a little dream of me. Say nighty night tight and tell me you'll miss me while I'm alone and blue as can birds singing in the
So yeah, I guess from levels 1 to 4, you realised that you thought you were just playing like a normal game and trying to work out the narrative. And then for those who got to level 5, that's where I guess the kind of brand wow moment, as we like to call it, where the digital meets the physical world, where you're actually then invited out to one of 12 bars within London. And we actually had people who had obviously been playing in Manchester and around the country actually coming down on trains to actually have the bar experiences and then staying over for the rest of the week to try and make it to the final. So yeah, as you saw by the video, when people walked in, we had iBeacons that would trigger the app that would say, you know, take this to the bartender. He types in a 4-digit code, which then gives you your free drink. And then once you've done that, you are given a number to call, and you have a one-on-one experience with an actor to kind of tell you and further the narrative for the game. And then as you progress again through the levels, there's another level where you walk into a hair salon and they take a sample of your hair. And the whole idea is that eventually it's a commentary about data collection. It's a commentary about privacy, how much data you're willing to give up, and how much addictive the game is. And those two things go in parallel. And obviously the people who want to give up the most and want to go as far down the rabbit hole obviously get to the final. When we launched, well, in fact, 2 days before we launched, the Punch Drunk fans had already got hold of it on the App Store because it has to go live for a day before you can even start to go live. They'd already played through it all the way through to level 7. They already had all of the comments that we realised we still needed to fix, which is both good and bad. Luckily, there weren't too many fundamental problems with the game, and we managed to push that out on the kind of the final one when we actually went live. But super useful to be able to harness those Punch Drunk super fans in real time. And then in order to get the journalists involved, they were also called by a Punch Drunk actor a day before launch to immerse them in the game. And then we sent them on these really cool mini Instagram projectors, which had 10 pieces of kind of teaser content that were projected onto their walls in their offices to kind of kickstart the campaign. That started creating conversations, maybe not as many as Steve can do these days, but nevertheless, when you talk about branded hashtags, you know, maybe people don't really love branded hashtags, but I think because of the history of Absolute X and Absolute Y, Absolute Silverpoint seemed to work really well and came out really well in terms of the brand cloud when we did a little bit of digging there. And as Dan said earlier, in terms of Facebook, obviously, in terms of edge ranking going down, having to amplify through social media. So at each key point, we amplified each of those posts to push out the game even more. And from our point of view, media wasn't really about driving a message. It was about purely from a mobile media point of view. It was driving as many downloads as we could within the first 3 days. Basically, people had a whole week to play through to get through to enough levels in order to allow them to get through to the final. We actually kept level 5 open, so even if you played the game after week 2, you could still go into a bar, still have that experience, still get a free drink, still have that one-on-one with the actor. You just wouldn't make it necessarily through to the final, but we still wanted to reward people for the amount of engagement and time they spent. I mean, on average, people were spending 2.5 hours playing the game, so great engagement levels there. And then for us, media really just played a part in just driving that consistent message. So we had the palm image, which is the secret lies in the palm of your hand, to actually launch the game. Then we swapped to the sketch version of the bottle, and then finally, once the campaign was finished, we swapped to the full colour version of the WARHOL bottle to say, actually, it was all about the WARHOL limited edition. Please go out and buy it now. And then it just didn't end there. We made sure that people were rewarded after the campaign to reinforce brand love. So we hooked up with one of our key bar chains, Be It One. And again, everyone who had downloaded the game, they may not even have played it much, but we still we rewarded them with an Absolute cocktail at the end of the day. So for us, it's really making sure that we still drive to purchase, we still drive to an occasion, be that off trade, i.e. buying the bottle, or on trade, enjoying one of the cocktails in an Absolute bar. So we like to talk about return on involvement, another buzzword there. But in terms of the game funnel, so we had 35,000 website visits, 22,000 downloads, 13,000 active players who were on average playing, as I said before, on average 2.5 hours. We had about 1,500 people through to the level 6 bar, We had 500 people through to the salon where they take a sample of your hair, and then 500 people at the finale who were also allowed to bring along a friend. So at each stage you're encouraged to bring along a friend so that you could enjoy the experience with them. The 500 just went through the final experience where you realise you're part of a cult and you've been sucked into the game, and Chloe never existed, and effectively your name is replacing Chloe's in this ever virtuous / vicious cycle of being indoctrinated into this secret circle. Great reach. More importantly, we were allowed to collect some data, so we had another 6,000 people sign up to our newsletter, some good social mentions, but more importantly, in total, 5,000 absolute brand and hand moments across multiple levels, and also the final and some of the redemptions at the end at Pier 1. So I'm just going to leave you with, I guess, 5 key principles that we took on board really when we do any collaboration, and also what we learned from this particular project. First and foremost, it's about, for me, creating with people at the source. So you've got Paul Benham, who's the creative director of Something Else. You've got Felix Barrett, creative director of Punch Drunk, and myself. And between the 3 of us, we kind of formed that core team. Obviously, my team at Pernod Ricard, who work on the Absolut brand, worked incredibly hard as well. It was a massive team effort. But when you get to the source of everything, the best creative comes out. It was also an experiment, so it was an R&D experiment. No one really knew whether or not it would work. We'd never used iBeacons before. We'd never driven people through to the on-trade in that particular way. Would the game be any good? You're creating a game. The game itself has to be super compelling. We managed to tick that box, and so it was definitely a trust element there, and hand-holding along the way. One thing we made sure is that there was one point of contact that we as a client could contact, so that was the agency, and the agency and Punch Drunk were free to collaborate, free to have creative reign, and then they would report back to us, we would feedback, and that feedback loop was continuous, but it meant that there was a good flow of communication and people weren't talking over each other in that process. One of the big learnings, I think, from Punch Drunk's point of view and our point of view is that you are on a timeline when you're developing a game. You've got alpha, pre-beta, beta, and when you hit beta, that's when you lock down your functionality and you can't change it. The only thing you can do is change the copy. And Punch Drunk were very used to iterating from a theatrical point of view all the way up until the final performance. So that was a different way of working for them. One which was difficult, but one which was ultimately rewarding. And the last thing was winning hearts and minds. When you say to your marketing director, we're going to create this crazy R&D experiment, it's a game, it blurs the boundaries between the digital and physical world, it's going to cost X, I'm not sure if it's going to have any return on investment. It takes a lot of faith and a lot of internal selling. But the greatest thing was because it was a game, everyone could download it and everyone could play it. And we knew we'd kind of struck onto something good when the finance director is battling the marketing director to try and get through to level 6 and gain more stars and want to get to the final quicker than he did. So that was a big win for us. But there were multiple stakeholders. We had the WARHOL Foundation who have to sign off everything from a legal point of view to make sure they're happy. We had the Absolut team globally looking over our shoulders. And then obviously the collaboration between ourselves and Punch Drunk, which is a fantastic collaboration. I was so proud to be a part of it. And that's it. So thank you very much.